Right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Justin Roethlingshoefer with me. Justin is the founder of Own It Coaching. His mission is redeeming the health of the world. And I think as you hear his story from athlete to coach to business owner, you're going to hear where his passion comes from. So, Justin, thanks so much for being on today.
So great to be here, Phil. I just appreciate you and the platform, and I've been able to listen to a couple of these episodes, and I just love how different it is from the typical podcast that you listen to.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, to start your story, kind of looking back, 12-year-old Justin growing up in Canada falls in love with hockey. And one day after we'll say a practice or, a tryout, you're driving home with your dad and he has some wise words that stand out to you. So talk a little bit about just that interaction and what he shared with you.
Yeah, so you have to remember, growing up in Canada, hockey is a religion. Hockey is something that you do, and
Yeah.
from as man, my very first memory is waking up 4:30 in the morning. I've still got a photo. I had this shirt on with a big old bass fish on the front, and my dad had thrown my all my gear on. I was ready to go, sitting there. Again, you remember this is like a 3-year-old kid to go to hockey practice. And that was like the first time that I just fell in love with the sport. Like, I loved it. You couldn't get me off the outdoor rinks for the rest of my youth years. And I happened to be blessed with some talent, and at 12 years old was starting to play with 14 and 15-year-olds. And it was this in particular week that I guess maybe in my mind it was a week. It was probably more like a month, where I just wasn't performing well. I wasn't playing well. I wasn't standing out like I had been before. I'd been struggling a little bit,
Yeah.
and I was down on myself. And I still remember driving home. It was from practice, and my dad put his hand on my leg and he said, "Son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid." And the moment that he said that, there was something that just clicked in my mind of, well, I want to get paid, and like so I guess I have to figure out how to be the most consistent version of myself. What does that look like? And I realized that consistency didn't just come from trying to do something over and over again and be tried harder, but rather it became, how intentional can I be in building a system around me of habits, behaviors, and processes that will ultimately allow the outcome to be something that I truly desire.
I love it. So as you hear that and you start thinking about that, you buy in and you don't want to just be good at hockey. You want to figure out the fitness, the working out,
Yeah.
right? Like all of the elements that it takes to be good at hockey. Now, in a pursuit of that, you maybe became a guinea pig of your phone and maybe went too far in certain directions. And you talk about some, eating disorder, body dysmorphia that comes from it. So talk a little bit about the pursuit of that and how good intention was, but maybe without the right, direction or coaching, it could have went too far, maybe in a direction that you weren't intending.
Yeah, so the one thing that I didn't like start with was I was always an overweight kid. Like,
Mm.
I was always heavy. And if you looked at, if even me looking back at pictures from like, let's call it 9 through 13, you'd call me like a fat kid.
Mm.
And even though I was fat, I was incredibly fit. And
Yeah.
the weird dichotomy for a lot of young boys, especially around that age, is you're athletic, you're playing sports, you're doing all these things, and you just haven't hit puberty. Like, I was a
Mm.
very late bloomer in that way. And
Yeah.
um because kids are mean. um, I was always made fun of. I was always teased. I was always put into these different categories that I didn't want to fall into. And at 12 years old, working and playing with 13, 14, 15-year olds, you're obviously the youngest kid, and so you're still like even more so the butt of the jokes and
Right.
picked on. Well, my dad said that at 12, the summer of 2013, or the summer of my 13-year-old year, I started to train for the first time. Like up until then, I really had never trained, right? I went and now I was working out with a group of 14, 15-year olds, and I had this coach that was kind of guiding me. I was now focused on nutrition and focused on what I was eating more. I was focused on getting good sleep routines, night routines. I was reading medical journals where other kids were reading comic books. I was looking at data, so tracking heart rate variability, tracking sleep quality, tracking all these things. Like this is a 13-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, just because of the process, I was never focused on losing weight. Like this is the thing that I think people have to understand is I was never focused on, hey, I need to lose 25 pounds. It was just, I need to be the most consistent version of me.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
as that happened over the course of that summer, I couldn't even tell you the amount of weight I lost because I was just doing what I knew what to do, which was day-to-day practices and habits.
Yeah.
I showed up at camp um, late August, early September, and all of a sudden, parents that I had been playing with their kids for 4 and 5 years didn't recognize me in the arena. They said,
Mm.
"Justin, oh my gosh, you look phenomenal." I was like,
Mm.
thank you. Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean I look phenomenal? I thought I looked phenomenal before. Like, what are you talking about? And then the athletes, like my peers, started to look at me and go, "Oh my gosh, like what did you do?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "What do you mean? What did I do?" Like I I just went about my business. Like there was nothing that clicked for me. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was being validated for how I looked, validated for how I um for my level of fitness, and rather than being made fun of. And
Yeah.
for the first time in my life, I felt chosen. I felt
Mm.
included. I felt like I was a part of something. And that felt really good.
Yeah.
And immediately, something that felt good turned to a fear that crippled me, a fear that I like even talking about it, I still can feel that pit in my stomach of 13-year-old Justin not wanting to ever go back to the fat kid, the kid that was made fun of. All of a sudden, I saw something that I'd never seen before, and I
Mm.
couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unsee that. Oh my gosh, yeah, Justin was fat before. I don't want that guy. Like, keep that guy away from me.
Mm.
And so I went down this road of this deep level of obsession and body dysmorphia, anorexia, over exercising in every way, shape, or form. It got to a point where I was running between classes. I would have to do 10 squats every time I opened my locker. I would have to do 10 push-ups every time I walked through a door. Anytime there was a set of stairs, I had to run up and down twice. Every time I ate, I had to do 20 push-ups, 20 sit-ups. If I was watching TV during commercial breaks, I would hold planks. Like it was so obsessive, and it was no longer healthy, like to a point
Yeah.
where, I tell this story often. At 14, I went to my first Western Hockey League camp, was drafted into the Western Hockey League and stepped into Lethbridge's camp, and they'd only ever seen me play in equipment. They didn't know what I
Yeah.
looked like, and my dad never told me this story until I was about 19. Um, and I went to camp. I went up, and you have to realize that I started at 12, 13 years old at about 146 pounds. At 15, I was 97 pounds. Like, so
Wow.
that's the how far the other direction I went. I remember walking up, stood on the scale because you have to weigh in and you have to check in at camp. And as I weighed in at like 101 or something. And they looked at one another. I didn't know this, but my dad said they came up to him after and they said, "Are you joking us? Is this Justin's brother? Like, is this
Mm.
Justin's like kid brother? Like, where's Justin?" And my dad just shrugged his shoulders and like, this is this is him. But the crazy part was is I just kept performing on the ice. Like as soon as I took the ice, like I performed just like I always did.
Yeah.
And but the way I looked was now again keeping me separated from who I actually was. Because before you're the fat kid that just made fun of. Now you're the anorexic kid that's weird and different and nobody wants to be with you either.
Mm.
And so that was something that just was something really hard for me. And at 16, I walked upstairs. My mom's jaw hit the floor. She looked at me. My skin was yellow. Started getting testing. My liver was shutting down. Kidneys were shutting down. And so I was in a pretty bad position. Um, and was fortunate enough to get uh, a coach behind me that really coached me, guided me, helped me understand the fears that were there, a lot of understanding and taking ownership for that story and the journey that I had been on, and was blessed to come down to the States on hockey scholarship. Got 2 undergraduate degrees in exercise physiology and nutrition. Went and got my master's degree in exercise physiology, then to my postgraduate doctoral work in sleep and heart rate variability, which ultimately brought me to a 11-year career as a health and performance coach in the NCAA, and then for just shy of 6 years in the National Hockey League. And so it was a great journey, a great process. But as you say, it's a part of my story, and never would I have thought that journey would have allowed me to connect with so many people and reach so many people, especially the way that we are now, where we serve entrepreneurs, executives, business owners, business leaders, in making sure that they can take ownership of their health in a very personalized way, and scaling N of one solutions when it comes to health optimization.
Absolutely. Well, so I want to dive into, a comment that you made. And I think, one, thanks for just the vulnerability on talking through that piece of life. But two, I think the the idea behind it can be understood in many different people's realms where, hey, maybe that consistency that you've been striving for, the small things you've done, no one complimented you along the way, right? No one was like, oh my gosh, Justin, congratulations on doing that Wednesday second workout, or congratulations on Friday for doing an extra 10 push-ups. Like, no one was saying that. But then all of a sudden they see the end result, right? And then you get the validation there. And so what starts happening is we connect the validation with the end result, but really it was the process that got us there, right? So talk a little bit about, that for somebody who's in a season of life, and maybe they're starting to get those end result validations, and they're maybe losing the consistency, or they're in a different phase where they're starting to be consistent but they haven't seen the end result yet, and they're starting to lose hope that, hey, the goal that I've been striving for is coming. So talk a little bit about that realm and that balancing act there.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I'm actually to start my answer, I'm gonna throw a question back at you, Phil, because this is
Yeah.
often when I'm talking on stages, giving keynotes. This is a question I ask everybody. So by now I've probably asked close to 250,000 people this question, and I start to see a lot of the same answers. And so when I say the word health to you, what would you say health is? In a word, when I say health, what words come to your mind?
I think physical fitness, I think
Great,
sleeping, diet.
great.
Those are probably the three kind of things that come to mind.
Awesome. I get all those all the time. I get strength. I get cardiovascular fitness. I get six-pack abs. I get quality sleep. I get quality nutrition, self-care, mental health. All of these things are usually things that come up. When I say the word performance, what words come to mind?
Peak or optimal.
Awesome. What else?
Hmm. Success.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Peak, optimal, success. I get winning. I get efficiency, attaining a goal. Um, these are all words that I get. The
Yeah.
reason I ask these two is because health precedes performance. Health comes before performance. Health
Mm.
has to be optimized before performance is realized. However, let's pay attention to what your answers for both health and performance were, and what everybody else's answers for health and performance were.
Yeah.
They're all outcome driven.
Mm.
They're all results based. Success, optimized, six-pack abs, quality sleep, strength, muscles. They're all outcomes based.
Right.
We as a society have been taught to look at the outcomes and the results of what has happened as that's the success.
Yeah.
Where in actuality, I've created a different thought process when it comes to what health and performance actually looks like. It's intentional and consistent behaviors
Mm,
that allow us over time to realize our potential.
mm,
That's what health and performance is all
love
about
it.
for me. Intentional and consistent behaviors that are done over the course of time to realize our potential. And when we realize that success has nothing to do with the outcome, success has nothing to do with the result, but everything to do with the system and the process in which we've set up to get there, that's when we win. That's when our life changes. That's when we're all of a
Mm,
sudden willing to be patient, to sit in the mundane, to sit in the routines, to sit in the things that we do on a regular basis and get these results. Because here's the downside, and I can say this very openly and very well. You can go to the gym for a month straight. You're still going to be fat and out of shape.
mm,
You can go to the gym for a month straight and you're still going to be scrawny and anorexic.
mm.
But guess what? You go to the gym, you eat well, you do these things for a year. That's no longer the case. That's
Yeah.
no longer the case. But it wasn't workout 97 or 150 or 285 that boom immediately shot me into shape. It was the exact same workout I did on day one as I did on 285, but because I did it that for that level of consistency and intentionality over the course of time, I realized a result that I was looking for. I just wasn't patient enough to get there. And so that's
Love
where
it.
all of this comes from, is how can we be patient? How can we be intentional? How can we be consistent and have a process and system to get us there? Because we do not rise to the level of our goals, but rather we fall to the level of our systems. And 95% of us have systems that are built for failure, have
Mm.
systems that are built out of default. And that's the life that we're living, is a life of default, not a life by design, not something that's intentional and consistent. And if we can change that thought process, if we can change that mindset, that's when things start to change for you.
I love it. Now, I want to tie that into a story. So I'm gonna bring up a brief story in your life, and then we'll tie it into that. So you mentioned, hey, play college hockey, and we could probably spend an entire episode just on that, lessons learned, all of those things. But after college hockey, you still have this competitive nature, right? You still have this competitive desire, and so you start doing different, running and Spartan races and all these different items. And to maybe relinquish some of that, you say, all right, my goal is I'm gonna run 2 miles every day for the next 90 days. And on the last run, you have kind of what you just shared with us, this moment of realization on, well, what is a goal, right? And what is a good goal versus what's maybe an unfulfilling goal. And I think that's so important. So talk a little bit about that story, and then we'll tie that into what you were just sharing on your journey here.
Yeah. So I'll give a little bit more context so I
Yeah.
think it hits with the audience a little bit more. As I finished playing college hockey, I needed something to compete at. I needed
Yeah.
something to challenge me, because what I found was without the game day, consistency was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
It was something that I just didn't have a desire. I had trained so hard for so long to go and show up on game day and make a team or challenge for a championship. Like, you were on a journey, you were going for something. And when that was all of a sudden gone, I felt very empty. I felt like, man, like what am I doing this for? Like, why am I pushing so hard? And I found myself in a little bit of a rut. And so went to the CrossFit Games in 2013, went to regionals, subluxed my shoulder, tore my biceps tendon, and that was really the end of my Olympic lifting CrossFit career. After that, I got into half marathons. After that, I got into High Rocks and Deca, which is like kind of like outdoor adventure races. And there was a point in time where I started to step up to the start lines, and I would get so anxious. Like, it was almost like debilitating. And when I would finish the race, oftentimes I was podium finishers, world championship status, winning US championships. the moment I finished the race, I had the exact same feeling that I had when um when I finished playing hockey. I was like, okay, well, what's next? And there was
Yeah.
always a what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, and always this level of expectation on myself to go and win.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I was looking at my Instagram feed one day, and I won't name him by name, but everybody knows this guy. He says everybody's got to be hard. If you're not staying hard, you're not doing anything right. You got to run every single day. If you're not doing it, you're not a man. And I was like, screw you, I'm a man. Like, I'm gonna show you. And
Yeah.
so I told everybody on Instagram, I'm going to go and I'm going to show you what intentionality actually looks like. I'm going to run
Mm.
2 miles every day for 90 days. It's 180 miles. And it's whether it's rain, shine, wind, snow, whether I'm traveling, speaking, on the road, working, whatever, I'm going to do it. Well, we get to day 90 and I get out and I start running just as I've done the previous 89 days. And I start running and I get this weird feeling in my stomach, the same feeling when I finished races, the same feeling when I stopped playing hockey. And at a certain point I was running, it was right at the start and I said to myself, who cares? Like,
Mm.
who cares that I'm doing this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna finish. There's no crowd. There's nobody there. Like, who cares? And I started to really analyze, why was I doing this? What was this for? And I realized it all had everything to do with my ego. It had
Mm.
everything to do with me proving to myself that I was worthy, proving to myself that I was enough, proving to myself that I could be loved, proving myself that I was, um, I was somebody that should be celebrated.
Mm.
And I started to get really emotional on this run. And with about 500 meters left, I literally stop on a dime and I hear this voice in my head, and it was God speaking to me. He goes, "Your win is not finishing."
Mm.
And I stopped on a dime. I sat down, and I just started to cry. And I started to cry because I knew that I had this hole inside of me that was just not being filled. That I was ultimately idolizing my fitness, idolizing the way that I was operating, and I needed to change that. I needed to shift that. I needed to relinquish that, surrender that. And I called an Uber. I got into an Uber. They drove me 500 meters because if I would have walked it, I would have finished. And
Yeah, right.
so and so I'm the guy that didn't finish. I'm the guy that chose not to. I was the guy that intentionally made a decision to stop because my lesson was meant to be somewhere else. And so that was really what that story had for me, and has really just left me in a true state of surrender and freedom that I haven't had in my life. And that was about 5 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
that happened. And it's just allowed me to now operate in a completely different field of selflessness. And it's not about me, but how am I bringing others along in this journey, and how am I teaching, educating, empowering, and using these stories to help people relate to why are they doing things and what's the purpose and intention behind them.
Well, so I love that. And I love what you said, and then sharing that story. And one of the things that I'd like to highlight is, so frequently our goal is something that is finite. And we're taught that, right? Make it measurable, make it something that can be counted. And the beauty of that is that there is a point in time where you can track your progress, right? That's one of the reasons people encourage you to do that. The downside is that we oftentimes have one of two things happen. One is we hit the goal and we're like, this is the most unfulfilled feeling that I've ever felt. Like it lasted 12 seconds and now I'm like, okay, so now what? Or we hit the goal and we become addicted to the feeling of hitting a goal and we become unfulfilled in the process of everything we're doing up until that moment of hitting the actual goal that we've set. And, someone shared with me once, if you set a goal that is something that you're continuously progressing towards, that there's maybe no finite end date to it, right? Like if Justin's goal was, I want to be the best husband I can be, and I think the best way for me to be a great husband is I want to be the most honest husband that exists. It's like, well, then you'll never arrive there, right? Because it's just a constant method of being honest and being transparent with your spouse. And that's
Yeah.
something that you have to show up, you have to do it every single day. And so you do fall in love with the consistency and the process of it, opposed to, I'm just doing this because once I hit this goal, then I can be done, or then I'm, on to the next thing. So talk a little bit about that for somebody that, has been either struggling, like, man, I hit the goal and it was unfulfilling, or I just, I've fallen so out of love with the process because all I'm doing is waiting for that 12 seconds of I hit my goal.
Yeah, there's a saying, and it goes, the man who loves walking will go further than the one who loves the destination.
Mm,
Because when you fall in love with the process, when you fall in love with the day-to-day actions, that's when you realize what a blessing it is to be able to get up and do exactly what you do every single day.
yeah.
And so many of us have, I see this a lot. I ran my first official full marathon. I can tell another story in regards to that. Very similar to that 90 days of 2 miles a day, but I went on a quest to run 100 miles, and I ran 99, and same kind of example there where I stopped and right before, because I was like, this isn't it. This is not it. But I ran my first marathon in October, and you see these people, they prepare and they do all the things and they get going. And the one of the guys that I was running it with, it was his first. He would never really been a runner, and in training for this thing, the whole time, like, I would have never had this mentality. It was, I have to go, I have to train, I have to go, and I have to run a 3 hour marathon. This is what I'm going to push for. It's either do this or I'm a failure. This is where I'm at. But this whole time that I was training for this thing, I just had this deep voice. This isn't your race. This isn't your race. Finishing is your race, and you're going to get these other two guys through this thing, and that's what you're going to do, and that's going to be the win. And it was the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. And I think we finished in like 4 hours. And because it was seeing somebody else succeed, it was seeing somebody else break a barrier, somebody else break a thought process that they had never thought that they were capable of, or never thought they were able to do.
Yeah.
And that was I think the coolest part for me. But what I ultimately see is, and I see and hear this all the time, is people go and they sign up for a marathon, they sign up for a race, and there's such a purpose and an intention about what they're doing. And the moment they run the race, they have the same feeling as I had. They get almost depressed for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. They can't seem to go and even run 1 mile. They
Mm,
can't even go and get into the gym. They can't even go and do their wellness practices. They can't even go and meditate or do breath work or sit in the sauna or do whatever it is that they do in that process leading up to that, because there's nothing that they're no longer going for. And I really want to challenge people on this, because it's not about finishing a race. It's not about signing up for a start line. It's not about doing any of these types of things. These are good to have periodically, especially in a
yeah.
community where you're challenging yourself to get going and kind of get fired up. But at the end of the day, we need to be training and designing designing our days for life.
Mm,
That's why I now go after it. That's now why I train,
yeah.
because I want to be prepared and see the beauty every single day in what life can provide. So I'll
Mm,
give you a perfect example. Somebody asked me the other day to go do a 13-mile run. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go do a 13-mile run with you. Went and did the 13-mile run. Week later, hey, Justin, do you want to come climb a 13-mile high, or a 13-foot high mountain in Colorado? Yeah, I'll do that. Let's go. Hey, Justin, we're going to do rim to rim to rim. Do you want to pay attention and go and do that in the Grand Canyon? Yeah, I'll do that. My wife, do you want to go do a hot yoga class? Yeah, I'll do that. Hey, do you want to play in this flag football tournament? Yeah, I'll do that. You want to go play hockey this Saturday? Yeah, I'll do that. I can now say yes to all these things because I'm so well rounded, so well versed. I'm doing all of these things. And it literally just becomes the opportunity to say
mm,
yes. And
yeah.
there's nothing holding me back. It is this holistic, all-encompassing, well-rounded individual that it does not need to go and hit podiums for egos anymore, but rather being able to say, I am here for everybody, and I am here with the greatest health for myself, that I have just this massive spectrum that I can now do things and see the greatness in what life has to offer, and just be full of gratitude every single day that I go through my process. My process is very simple. I wake up every single morning around 5:45. I spend the first 15 minutes just kind of getting mobile, stretching, getting my water in. I go into the my gym. It's right in the backyard. It's beautiful in like the jungle of Miami. I get a great workout in. I invite 3 or 4 people over every day of the week. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 4. Just really depends. This morning we were out at the hill, running sprints. There was 5 of us. I try to incorporate as many people as possible, but I go out, I get my workout in, I go sit in the sauna for 20 minutes, I get into the cold plunge, I go back and finish in the sauna, I come inside, I sit with my Bible, I read, I journal, and then I start my day. And that's literally what I do every single day. And whether I'm in the gym, whether I'm doing a long run, whether I'm doing hill sprints at the track, whether I'm doing sled pushes and pulls, whether I'm doing yoga, it doesn't matter. But these things are all these things are all interchangeable in my morning time, so that I'm this well-rounded individual that's able to do these things. And every Saturday I play hockey. So like I try to have this variance, but my mornings are always the same. It's the same 5:45 to 8 o'clock time frame that is kept for me, in a combination of fitness, a combination of movement, a combination of mobility, a combination of athletics, and cardiovascular work, long runs, sprinting, whatever fits in there that day. I want to have that well-rounded nature so that I can go and do all these things, um, and be fit
Yeah.
to lead people. Um, and in order to do that, I needed to heal first. There's a big thing that I was talking with um, a group of men about the other day, and I said the issue with a lot of men as they're leading today is that there's a lot of wounded men trying to lead. And when
Mm.
wounded men try to lead, men that have not healed from these things, have not overcome these things, even though they have great intentions of leading well, all they end up doing is bleeding all over everybody that they're trying to lead. And I see that so many times in positions of leadership, is that there's true wounds in these men, or these people that have, I can speak to men specifically, but so many wounds in these men that have not truly healed from these things that they've gone through. And because they haven't healed, they aren't actually stepping into the true potential in which exists for them. And it requires healing, going back and understanding. You have to figure out what your race is, and find out, hey, what have you been trying to do, and what have you been trying to chase, and where do you just need to sit down and call an Uber? Where do you just need to do something different and call that your win? Where do you need to have an epiphany and a realization and an ownership moment when you can truly say, hey, this isn't anybody's fault but mine, and I have to heal my wounds, in which are here, so that I can ultimately go and be a better version of me for everybody else.
I love it. That's good, man. Now, going back to your story, so and you had mentioned it. Hey, after playing college hockey, get a master's, and you know what's interesting is your goal was to play in the NHL. And so you learned all of the things that one would need to do, but there's only so many people that get to play in the NHL. And, you know, you could have said, well, gosh, what the heck did I learn all that for? What a waste. You know, I mean, now I'm not playing hockey anymore. Like, what do I do? But you pivoted and you said, all right, well, I learned all of this. Now, how can I impart that wisdom and knowledge into someone else or in on someone else? And so you start in the college Division I rankings, and then eventually work your way into the NHL and do some performance and strength coaching there. So talk a little bit about how you made that jump from you know, college to NHL and the work that you did there. And I would like for you to highlight a little bit of what you found, and that was everyone was trying to do the same thing, and everyone's not the same.
Yeah. So the transition was actually something that was very easy. And when I mean it was very easy is I I mean, at 13 I had a passion for this concept of understanding your body and preparing your body and creating these intentional and consistent practices. And so as I was doing this in myself for a decade, before I even had the opportunity to end my college career, um, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to help other people do the same thing. And so that's what I studied in school. That's what I focused on. That was my primary area of study. But then it was also what I put all of my extra time into, doing other research papers with professors and et cetera. Like that's where I leaned in heavily over the course of my college career. Every summer, I didn't go home. I went and did internships, from whether it was at Quinnipiac to whether it was at Louisville. And that ultimately built into my master's program. And then once my master's program was done, that's when I got my first consulting job in the NHL. And so the cool part about that was the dream of playing in the NHL. Um, I knew that was gone, and that was okay, but that didn't mean that I couldn't get there and have an impact in another way. And as I stepped in and really started to see, hey, we've got all this data, we've got all this information, we've got all this technology that we are able to track players with, but nobody knows how to use it.
Mhm.
Everybody at the NHL level was training the same, recovering the same, sleeping the same, traveling the same, supplementing the same, eating the same. But yet the ownership teams, the coaching staffs, they were wondering, why are we getting the same results? Why are we sick at the same time? Why are we injured at the same time? Why are we seeing energy lulls and not performing at elevated rates? Like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
And I kind of shook my head and I was like, because you're doing the same thing as everybody
Right.
else and you're treating
Right.
everybody the same.
Yeah.
Everybody is different. Everybody is unique. Everybody has different stress tolerances. Everybody has different resiliencies. Everybody has different capacities. Everybody has different experiences in the past. And ultimately, where they're starting, their base level is all different. And so we have to treat them differently. And so I came in and I started to use data, heart rate variability, jump testing, power tracking, um, uh, uh, training load tracking, from like practices and games to being able to quantify workloads. Like, this is what I brought into the league. And at first, people were very resistant to it. They were like, this seems complicated. This seems difficult.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't like it, because now you're telling me we have to not work so hard on some days and work harder on other days. And I really don't like this. And I said, just trust me
Mhm.
and allow me to get into this and show you.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate, very blessed. Enrico Blasi at Miami, and then Tina Murray at Louisville were the first that really, I say, allowed me to fail, meaning they allowed me to truly do what I wanted to do and work through it live. And that was where not only did we learn a lot, but we also became the least injured team in the league, the least sick team in the league. We ended up winning championships in all of those years, and that's when all of a sudden everybody started to go, wait, what's happening over there? What are they doing? What secret do they know? What do they know that we don't? And I said,
Yeah.
I actually don't know any more than you do. It's just that we're utilizing the data in a very intentional and consistent way that you're not. And we have a system in which we operate with that allows us to have the results that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And um and so that ultimately is what brought me to the NHL, and that same system is then what I've now made available to everybody in the world, that we now serve people with, is making sure that people understand their sleep quality. Why is your sleep quality poor? Well, we have to now change our habits and our behaviors and our routines around that. What do we need to do based off of the season of life you're in, the priorities that you have, and the way that your body's operating, to make sure that we can optimize for that? Well, your HRV is low. What does HRV mean? It means that you're not optimizing stress. You're not recovering from stress well. Well, how do we change our habits and behaviors around this? Your cellular testing comes back with high levels of deficiency. Well, how do we change that? Let's focus on foods that are highly focused in this area, and now we can custom supplement you as well. So we're allowing data to drive decisions, data to determine directions we go, not feelings, emotions, and opinions. which a lot of us are usually running our bodies off of and our life off of. And so now as we do this, we have a much more intentional and consistent way to build a system around how we're operating in a life by design.
I love it. Now, you made it a point, hey, you were in the NHL, you were doing your thing, and for a lot of people, that would be kind of like the end job, right? It's like, holy cow. But you had made a comment that it was like having success without fulfillment, right? It wasn't something that left you as fulfilled because your mission was bigger. And so all of a sudden, somebody says, well, hey, do you think you could do that for me? And although they weren't an NHL athlete, you're like, yeah, I think that's possible. But what I know is you were very strategic and you had two different coaches that you know, really kind of asked to pour into you and give it feedback. So that's been a consistent theme for you is having coaches or, you know, mentors or people that maybe have been there and are encouraging to go to the next direction. So talk a little about that pivot from focusing on the NHL to different, you know, individuals and the coaching that came with that.
Yeah, it was one of the owners of the team. I went from Washington to Anaheim, and he called me with, I think 4 or 5 months after I had left. And he said, Justin, I don't know what you did with our guys, but do you think you can do that for me? Because I'm not feeling well. And
Mm.
when he walked in, I looked at him and he looked like he had aged about 15 years in 5 months. And I said, what is going on? He goes, I have no idea. He goes, I've been to all the doctors. They tell me I'm healthy, but I just know something's wrong. And so we took him through the process. I put him through cellular testing. We understood where his deficiencies were. We found 15 vitamin and mineral deficiencies at the cellular level. We started to look at sleep quality. He was getting about 15, 20% of quality sleep when you should actually be closer to 40 or 50%. We started to change some behaviors. We started to supplement differently. We started to have him eat a little bit differently. And within 6 months, he goes, I feel better than I have in 15 years.
Wow.
And it was that parlayed with my story of um, getting sick and not really feeling well, that I was like, you know what? This is not an athlete issue that I'm solving. It's a
Mm.
human issue.
Yeah.
And that was what really propelled me and convicted me to leave the NHL because um, that comment of success without fulfillment is being my ultimate failure was I could have stayed in the NHL. I could still be there today, and could be there till I'm 60.
Yeah.
And but at the end of the day, being at that level and in that league also requires a lot of sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, I would also say a lot of selfishness.
Mm.
Selfish to my family. I'm gone
Yeah.
on the road 100 days a year. I'm focused on these players and these athletes from uh, September right through May or June. And so there's a lot of selfishness and sacrifice that comes with that, and I just wasn't willing to stay there and was willing to be in it. And at the same time, I also found that my identity was found in the logo of the NHL. Like that was where I found my identity. That was where I found my worth. That was where I found, that's where my ego sat.
Mm.
And I needed to be able to put that down and say, hey, this is not about me, but rather this is about everybody that I'm meant to serve. And this isn't meant to be behind a closed door for 26 men. This is meant to be for the human population so that they can take ownership of their health and they don't have to be hopeless. They don't have to feel helpless. They don't have to feel down and out. They don't have to feel so confused and um, and conflicted on what they need to do for their health. They don't need to go and earn their illness. They can actually be proactive. They can actually be preventable if they just understood a couple
Mm.
metrics and felt empowered in their health. They no longer had to be dependent on a person, place, or thing to tell them whether they were healthy, to tell them whether they were going the right direction, but rather they could feel convicted in themselves, knowing I know exactly where I'm at because I understand the data. I understand the decisions I'm making. I understand the direction I'm going. And when you feel that, you now all of a sudden start living differently. You feel like you have a different level of confidence. And so you take the fear, you take the confusion, you turn it into confidence and conviction. And I just knew that that was the direction I needed to go. And we've just been so blessed to help tens of thousands of people over the last 3 years, and to see the life change that occurs. It just confirms everything that I was hoping and trusting in as I was leaving, that this was going to impart on our mission to redeem the health of the world.
I love it. Now, you are in downtown New York City, and it's a very special day for you. You've, blocked out a room at Lululemon, and you're excited about the release of a book. And then the time of 7 p.m. comes, and then 7:30 comes. And so talk a little bit about that night, because once again, it's unbeknownst maybe at the time, but a catalyst to what comes for the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, so this is a really great story when we talk and continue to lean back in on confidence
Yeah.
and commitment, consistency, perseverance, intentionality.
Mhm.
I just left the league. Like, people have to understand, I've now made the choice. I've left the NHL. I'm no longer in the NHL. I'm now going out to take this out to the world. I had written a book during my last year in the NHL called Blueprint. Um, and it was meant to help educate and empower people on, like, hey, how do you, like, what does it look like? How do you take from yourself from where you are to now be more like the corporate
Yeah.
athlete of whatever it is that you would like to look like, how you would like to perform?
Yeah.
And I got, as you said, I rented out Lululemon headquarters. I sent out like 200 invitations. I think I had 45 responses back that they were coming. I had sponsors come in. I had photographer and videographers present. I even had somebody come in and open for me. And I get there on this day, and everything is set, everything's ready. Doors was supposed to start at like 7:30. At 7 o'clock, I start waiting for people. Nobody's kind of coming in. 7:15, 7:30, still nobody. At 7:35, a homeless man walks in. I give him like a protein bar and a glass of water and send him on his way. And I think I gave him a book too or something. And at 7:45, I finally looked around and I said, I don't think anybody's coming. And I realized that, like zero people came. Like zero. Nobody. It's not even like you perform for an audience of 5. Like zero. Nobody was in the seats.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. I'm near tears. I I'm completely defeated. And I'm a little angry, to be honest, at the same time. And there was two choices. I could have told everybody, "Hey, thanks for coming, but poor little old me," and walk away, or I could go and I could deliver this just like the room was full. And I got to the front, delivered it like the room was full. We got video content, we got pictures. There's actually a picture on one of my speaking sites, and it's the picture of me speaking. And we had like the sponsor sit in the front row so we could get photos that like looked that there was somebody there. But I pull those pictures out all the time and I look at them because nobody came, nobody. And as the end of that, at the end of that, presentation, I looked at the camera guy and I said, "You mark my words, in 3 years, these rooms will be full and I'll be getting paid for this." And he rolls his eyes and he looks at me and goes, "Okay, kid, keep
Yeah.
on dreaming." And and I held on to that because today we're now 3.5 years later, and I speak on 110 stages a year, going into my third book deal. And life just looks very, very different. But it was only because of my consistent, intentional, and deliberate systems that are in place that I've been doing over and over and over again. And speaking to a room of nobody now allows you to speak to a room of 5,000 and have them connect, have them lean in, have them moved by a message that can actually reach them and impart on the mission that you're on.
I love it. Now, the mission that you're on with Own It is one to have people, really own, right, their journey, their health journey, and what that means to them. But second is you're making it in an affordable way. I mean, I think a lot of people that's the hurdle, right? Or maybe that's the excuse they make as the hurdle. But you guys have done unique things to make it more affordable for people to be able to entertain and learn, what they need to do. So talk a little bit about the mission of Own It. I mean, we've talked about your presence there, but then also a little bit about how you're making it affordable for different folks.
Yeah, so really great question. The cool part about this is what we do is very, very different from what you're going to find anywhere else. We use data to drive decisions. We empower you. We coach you along the way. We custom formulate supplementation. We're using cellular testing. We're using wearable devices to understand sleep quality and HRV. You have the support team to hold you accountable, to guide you, or literally hold your hand through the process. And typically where people say, hey, I want to do this. This is exactly what I want. But do you take insurance? And anybody in the proactive health space, whether it's naturopaths, functional medicine doctors, your niche medical system, your personalized healthcare, it's all cash based. And it's like, hey, it's going to cost you $500 for a doctor's visit. It's going to cost you another $2,000 to get testing done. That just wasn't okay with me when it came to redeeming the health of the world. Like this is not just for the rich, not just for the elite. It is. I want truly to make this available to everybody. And so for the last 2.5 years, we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed for insurance companies to ultimately help cover what we were doing. And we had a couple situations where insurance companies would have covered this, but they wanted us to trade and give all of the data we were giving back to
Mm.
them. And we just said we weren't willing to do that. We want to make this accessible. And so they continued to say no. And I'm proud to say that today we are the only coaching, testing, and supplementation company in the world that accepts not NSF, HSA and FSA dollars. So flex spending accounts, health spending accounts for all of our services, coaching, testing, and supplementation. And so for people, that's a huge win because number one, it's pre-tax dollars. Number two, you're putting it away. Your employer's usually matching it. And you're getting everything that we're doing theoretically at about a 80% discount on the dollar of what you typically spending. So that this was just a huge breakthrough for us, a huge breakthrough for people to be able to lean into what we do and how we do it, and being able to help them get more out of their health journey, which has just been so awesome.
I love it. Well, Justin, you and I could sit here and talk for the next 5 hours. I know you got people to go impact, but I just want to say thanks for sharing your journey and the pivotal moments that led you to where you're at, and excited to continue to watch your journey. And we'll have to do this in another, 2 or 3 years. New book's going to be out, the business will be growing, and we'll talk about where you're at that point.
It's so good, Phil. I appreciate you. And for everybody listening out there, there's um I've got a new book coming out in 2 weeks called The Power of Ownership. Redeem your health, live life by design, and break the relentless pursuit of normal. And I think in this book, it's just so cool to be able to see the stories come to life. But then as you go through this book, not only do you uh, see it in a very simple way, but it becomes this tool that you can continue to come back to, that everything I just talked about. Okay, how do you take ownership of your health? What does this mean? Where do you start? What action steps do you take? How do you make it personal for me? What season of life am I in? What are my priorities? Where do I actually need to focus right now? Where do I start? How do I start? How do I create accountability? How do I optimize for these different factors and variables in my life? It literally allows you to build your N of one solution. And so you can have access to that at thepowerofownershipbook.com. Thepowerofownershipbook.com is where you can find that. And uh, being able to get into that book. That comes out on April 24th. I'm not sure when this was dropping, but at the time of filming, it's coming out in a few weeks. So really excited to be able to get that into people's hands as a resource for them to start. And then being able to find us at ownitcoaching.com if they're wanting anything further and above and beyond that.